Hey yo, thanks for listening to our podcast. So today we're going to talk about the huge transitional period we now call Reconstruction. So it's a pretty wild time in history, in US history. Today we're jumping straight into the topic of Reconstruction. The wild turning moment was right after the Civil War, where America tried to rebuild itself using whatever supports they had at their hands. And those were hope, determination, and of course grit. So let's start with the obvious. After the Civil War, the state of the country was bad. People weren't in a better condition either. Some were broken, but some still kept hope. And boom, the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. Except, free didn't mean much at the time. Then, not long after, we got the 14th Amendment, which just means black people are now citizens with equal rights. The 15th Amendment gave us the right to vote, especially it gave the right to vote for men. Still, the state governments found ways to prevent them from voting. But again, still, African Americans were acting. They were building schools for themselves, for education, and some were even getting elected into office, which they always deserved. For a moment, people got real hope for the bright future.
Okay, let's get to our second part. The whole point of Reconstruction was to reconstruct the southern region's laws and leadership. In general, just make things less awful. There were some laws and support from the federal government like troops, and here comes what we now call the backlash. Politicians talk about those dumb local black codes, aka slavery, but with a few more steps involved. And when that wasn't insane enough, they introduced Jim Crow laws, like poll taxes and literacy tests, which were just other ways of keeping black people from voting.
So, even with all these advances, there's a question still. Why did it all fail? The harsh reality is that by 1877, political and economic fatigue led the North to back off from Reconstruction. People were tired, but who cared? They left with their troops, and that just meant that the South was back to their regime that took away African Americans' rights. All the rights that were just gained by African Americans are gone. Just to remind you, the Plessy versus Ferguson case in the Supreme Court stated that segregation was fine as long as it's equal. In my view, that doesn't make any sense.
What's next after all this disruption? To be fair, Reconstruction is seen as a total fail, but it also brought really important changes to the Constitution. The 13th, 14th, and 15th. Even about 100 years later, the civil rights movement leaders brought those up in order to fight segregation. But as we all know, the struggle didn't really stop. It's the same problems, but in different ways.
So, there you have it. After many failures, a few successes, and lots of stuff that is left undone, we call it the period of Reconstruction. So, until next time, we'll see you on the next episode of the American History Podcast. Take care.